The Best Ramen in the World by Project Equipment, Chapter 1. Naruto hummed in satisfaction as he laid the finishing touches to the bowl of ramen in front of him. It was a delicious serving of miso ramen, which was steaming hot and looking extremely appealing. Everything from the garnish to the broth looked and smelled absolutely delectable. He almost wanted to eat it himself, but that wouldn't do. What would his customers think if they saw the chef slurping up their orders? The cozy and homey reputation his shop had built up would vanish in an instant. That would be sacrilege. If people didn't recommend his shop to others, more customers wouldn't come, and then those people would miss out on the food of the gods. Ramen was technically the food of gods since it was his favorite food, but enough getting off topic. If the citizens of Vakio didn't revel in the glory of ramen, then it wouldn't spread throughout Remnant as a result. The who would worship the Oi, brat, would you shut up about ramen for one goddamn second? We're trying to sleep in here. He was cut off from his tirade as a voice boomed in his head. Yeah, he was wondering where his plushy companion was. Seriously, just because Kurama can't eat food, it doesn't give him the right to be salty when others enjoy ramen. Who the hell are you calling a plushie? And meathead, come into your mindscape for a second and I'll show you how we eat stuff, Kurama goaded. Naruto grew a tick mark on his forehead as he retreated into his mind. His mind was far from what it was in his early years, whereas earlier his mind was full of dimly lit hallways and danky sewers. Now it was exponentially larger and consisted of 8 different biomes: a desert for Shukaku, a lake for Isobu, a meadow for Kokuo, a swamp for Saikon, a replica of the mountains of Kumigakure for Matatabi and Yuki, a volcano for Sangoku, a rainforest for Chomi, and finally, a burning castle of fire and brimstone for Kurama. Why and how were all 9 of them together in a seal, you might ask? The answer is simple. After the Fourth Shinobi War, the Buiju were relatively free and were respected instead of feared. In that time, the elemental nations had recovered and were on the path to progress. The Shinobi alliance was going strong. Even the minor villages were aligning themselves with the cause of world peace, and life as a whole was generally good. Kakashi Sensei had become the Rukodaime Hokage shortly after, with Naruto himself in line for the position of non-dame. All his friends were surprisingly and conveniently paired together. No, seriously, that was a series of coincidences no one saw coming. Sasuke took Sakura along for his journey of atonement, or whatever edgy title he gave it. The emo bastard Kiba and Hinata ended up together. After she got tired of waiting for his answer, it wasn't his fault that he completely forgot about her confession. He'd gone 8 tails for Kami's sake. He didn't even remember her getting stabbed, let alone her confession. Shikamaru and Ino were in a relationship which he of course found troublesome. So were Lee and Tenten, Choji and Kaori. So he was the only one left single among the rookies. Somewhere in the Pure Lands, Aburame Shino was sulking while crouched in a corner. He was tracing circles with his fingers on the ground, while a cloud of depression hung over his head. Everyone always forgot about him, he thought, while tracing his circles. Since one of his dreams was to have a family, this got him down in the dumps. Even after he became the Hokage, he was still single. This peace lasted for a good 20 years. Then the Akatsuki happened. Those 3 stupid rabbits came down from whatever place they lived in and started hunting the Biju again. He had hoped against all hope, that the peace they fought for would last, but the second one of the major villages was threatened, they gave up their Biju out of fear. This was an action that infuriated Naruto to no end. With the help of Sasuke, and those broken Rinnegan of his, they had managed to defeat the threat of Momoshiki or whatever his name was. But this ordeal led Naruto to a sobering realization: humans suck, seriously. After the Biju did so much for them, suffered so much due to them, they still gave them up at the first sign of danger. He had enough of the power-hungry ways of humans and approached the Biju through their shared connection with a proposal: seal themselves within Naruto and then leave the Elemental Nations via Sasuke taxi. After making his points, the Biju agreed, as they too were fed up. As they didn't need the human interaction to live, they would be fine anywhere as long as they were together. Also, his seal was powered by the Shinigami itself, so it was much more flexible in accompanying them. So they did the sealing, and Naruto became technically the new Jubi Jinchuriki, and since he already had Ashura's chakra, one can connect the dots. As a result, Naruto became more powerful than Kaguya was. He decided to remain in the nations to gauge what effect his decision would have, and exactly as he had predicted, Childhood Part 2 began. Whispers of monsters and demon started floating in hushed tones, and the villagers tried to subtly control him like they did the Biju. Naruto decided that since he was still present, the power imbalance would be too severe if he were to remain allied to any hidden village. Thus, with a heavy heart, Naruto pulled the Sasuke, resigned as Hokage, and left Konoha to become a wanderer. It was then that he discovered he was now a chakra entity, much like Kurama, thus making him effectively immortal. He wandered around as a sage, helping people whenever possible with his shiny new Rinnegan. About 10 years later, Sasuke died on a mission for the village, and since the blood feud between Indra and Ashura had ended, they wouldn't reincarnate anymore. So Indra's chakra latched onto the closest similar source, Naruto. Now Naruto had become even more powerful ever since Kaguya was a goddess that made him a god. He left the Elemental Nations via Yomotsu Hirasaka and decided to open a rift to a random dimension. It was how he ended up in a place called Remnant with 4 kingdoms, rampant racism, and the legend of 2 gods. Well, it didn't matter to him since he was here just to relax and spend the rest of his days in peace. He arrived in Vacchio City, Vacchio Kingdom. Since he didn't know about this world, he decided to hang around there. He changed his appearance to hide his horns and whisker marks, as he was technically human and had enough of being seen as a freak for one lifetime. He then opened Ichimaki Ramen, a combination of his beloved Ichiraku and his own last name Uzumaki. It had been 3 years since then. His little shop was already a regular haunt of the locals, as his warm food came at a cheap price and was extremely delicious. He also did not discriminate against fawness, which was another plus in his book. All in all, Ichimaki was a place where anyone would be welcome. Snapping out of his reverie, he glanced at the nine-tailed fox. Kurama, aren't you taking it a bit far with the whole "I'm the almighty Kyubi-sama" bit? He asked the fox, who was sitting on a burning throne while cackling madly. What would you know, foolish human? Call me Plushy again and I'll eat you, Kurama warned. But you're so fluffy, and when I hug you, I just sink into your fur. Naruto muttered something which Kurama didn't catch. What was the last part, brat? Naruto mumbled, fidgeting slightly. Speak up, Kurama bellowed, making Naruto flinch. You have toe beans, okay? Naruto shouted. Then his eyes widened and he slapped his hand over his mouth when he realized what he'd let slip. Kurama was getting even redder than he already was. Whether it was from anger or embarrassment was anyone's guess. Naruto, being the idiot that he was, continued to dig himself into a deeper hole. Yes, and they are so soft, you know? One day you were sleepy and I booped one of them, and it was such a surreal experience. Naruto didn't get to continue as he was forcibly ejected from his mind. Stupid fox, he muttered while heading out to serve the ramen. His Kage Bunshin were already cleaning the mess and prepared to close up. Don't mind him, Naruto. He's just being tsundere, Watatabi chimed in. I most certainly am. Kurama was cut off as Naruto closed their link. He went to the seating area and saw that there was only one person inside. To be fair, it was about 10 in the night, so he wasn't all that surprised. Here you go, sir. One miso ramen, he said as he set the bowl down. The man thanked him and started eating. Taking his cue, Naruto went inside to finish up cleaning. After about 15 minutes, the man paid up and left. Naruto was just about to pull the shutter down when he felt a presence trying to invade his mind. He wasn't too worried, of course, as anything strong enough to get past his own defenses would be promptly repelled by his tenants. No, what surprised him that he didn't sense any malice of killing intent, just sadness and hunger. So he let the charade continue, hoping to see it through. From the corner of his eye, he spotted who was most likely the perpetrator, a little girl with green hair. She was a frail little thing, clad in rags that could barely be called such, and was thinner than a stick. She looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, and she looked much worse than he was at that age. Suddenly, her image was overshadowed by that of a small blond boy, just a little kid looking to get his next meal in a cruel world. No one to care for them, having to fend for themselves. He at least had old man Hokage, but this girl had no one. It reminded him of how he got introduced to Ichiraku's. The parallels were eerily similar. For all his power, he'd be damned if he let a little girl go hungry. Just as he was about to dispel her illusion and invite the girl in for some hot ramen, his tenants acted on his behalf. Emerald was a street urchin for as long as she could remember. She didn't have anyone to rely on but herself. The slums of Vacchio were no place for the weak, and she had to fight for every scrap of food she found. It helped that her semblance allowed for her to trick people into liberating their belongings and give them to herself. She could trust only herself, no one else. She would only get hurt, but she hadn't eaten in over 3 days, and she was on her last legs. Her last piece of bread was stolen from her by the bigger kids, and she was left with nothing yet again. So when she saw the small ramen stand where everyone seemed to always be happy, she scowled. How dare they? How dare they smile and be happy while she was starving in the streets? They knew nothing of hardship and strife. All they were good for was looking down on others who were less fortunate than them. She hated it. She hated them. So she decided to observe the place for a few days, and when the time was right, she would take the food for herself, while these rich people would suffer for once, and see how it feels to be in her shoes. The ramen stand owner was probably corrupt anyway, she reasoned. He had to be. How else could someone keep that idiotic smile in this hellhole of a city? Was he unaware of what was going on around him? How conceited would one have to be to smile and grin in this world? He must have stolen from someone, she mused. He probably cut corners and used cheap ingredients to save a few lien per bowl. He must be serving low-quality meals to customers and making money off of it. Aha! Got it. So that's why he is always smiling. He is laughing at their foolishness, she thought, her scared mind coming up with the only explanation she could stomach as to why this blond man was always smiling. Well, she would love to see the smile drop off his face when she tricked him and made off with whatever she could carry in her torn pillowcase. So she waited until the shop closed and went about her master plan. Emerald extended her semblance like a parasite seeking to latch on to the blonde's mind. She saw him jerk back, indicating that it worked. Now to the matter of food. She was cut off from her thoughts, as she was suddenly not outside the shop anymore. Where she ended up could only be described as the underworld, the castle of the Lord of Hell, if you may. The first thing she noticed was that it was hot, like scorching hot, and the air was heavy with a certain pressure. She needed to get out of here, wherever here was. I need to leave, she thought while panicking. How did I get here anyway? What is this place? Where? Oh, what do we have here? A dark voice boomed, and Emerald froze in place. Slowly she turned around, but she soon wished she hadn't. Death. That was the only thing running through her mind as she took in the sight before her. In the middle of the room was an ornate throne which was surprisingly on fire, and sat on the throne peering at her with blazing crimson eyes was definitely the scariest being she had ever seen in her life. The height of a mountain towering over her, making her feel like she was but an ant in its presence. Nine tails of the same color as its fur, swaying hypnotically behind its back. All in all, this monster cut quite an imposing figure. Well, brat, answer me, the voice said. What were you doing casting illusion on my host? Host? What did it mean by that? And the only one she had cast illusion on was. Her eyes widened in fear as the being cackled. It was a dark, malicious sound which went perfectly with the twisted smirk on its face. Just when she thought she couldn't be more scared, it continued, You know what happened to the last person who tried what you did? It asked, I ate him. It concluded with the finality of a god. It was then that Emerald finally gave up hope. She was going to die here. There was no escape from this hell, but she would not cry. No, she was stronger than that. She would go with her head held high, no matter. Oi, Furball, don't scare the poor girl, you know. Look at her, the poor thing is shaking like a leaf. A voice shouted, and just like that, the oppressive feeling vanished. It was instead replaced by a warm, covered feeling, almost like a fluffy blanket. And for a moment, Emerald almost let her guard down. She turned around yet again and saw the ramen man before her, standing behind her and glaring at the fox. Honestly, he takes it a bit too far sometimes. Sorry about that, little shrimp. The fox has this whole I am the lord of hell, how bow before my majesty face going on. He comforted while racing down and ruffling her hair. Reflexively, she swatted his hand away and went over his words. It wasn't just an act. She wasn't going to die. How did the ramen man show up anyways? And the most important question of all, what the hell did you call me? She shouted, not understanding the strange language. Naruto blinked. He was sure the girl would break down in fear, but this was what she asked. Seeing no harm, he answered, Little shrimp. I called you little shrimp. I think it fits, you know? Shaking her hand to derail that stupid train of thought, Emerald asked, Where am I? How are you here? Who are you? Who is that? What is going? She was interrupted as Naruto knelt down, his gaze softening as he did so. Sighing slightly, he stated, Whoa, whoa, slow down there, little shrimp. We have time, you know. It's okay, you're not in trouble, he soothed. Where we are is in my mind. I came here to dispel the illusion you cast on me. This fox is called Kurama, but that's a story for another time, he finished. She was slowly starting to settle down. Just then, the blonde asked the $1,000,000 question. So, what was the illusion for, little shrimp? Don't call me that, she replied hastily. My name is Emerald. Emerald, she all but shouted. Okay then, M-chan, I'm Naruto, but you didn't answer my question, he said, completely ignoring her scowl at calling her M-chan. She slowly muttered, looking absolutely adorable as she fidgeted under his gaze. Care to repeat that, M-chan? Naruto asked as he hadn't caught what the girl said. I said I wanted food. I haven't eaten in days, and I was hungry. She trailed off, only now realizing the reality of her situation. She was trapped in an unknown place with the man she intended to steal from. Due to her vacuous upbringing, she asked the only sensible question. You gonna kill me now? She had expected many reactions from the man, from anger to shock at such an absurd and brazen question, but what she saw shook her to the core, empathy and understanding. His eyes did not hold an ounce of pity, as if he knew she would hate it, but complete understanding of her situation and circumstances. She wondered how this smiling buffoon knew her pain, but he answered before her, I see. That was all he said for some time. Just as she was about to explode at him, the scenery changed. She now found herself in front of the ramen shop again, but the buildings around it were different. It didn't look like a city, but almost like a village. The Roman man started as if reading her mind. My village, to be precise, he said, and that, he pointed to a small blonde child in the corner, is me. He finished while wearing a sad smile. Emerald was about to ask why he was showing her this when he interrupted. I was about to invite you for a bowl of ramen, you know, he said, halting her snarky reply by holding up a hand. But I know enough to say that you would not have trusted my word. I know what it feels like to be in your place, but I know you won't believe a single thing I tell you. So, since we're already in my mind, I thought it better to show you, he said with those damn understanding eyes of his. Allow me to show you why I was genuinely going to invite you for ramen. He completed, and the memory started playing. Emerald watched, first with skepticism, then with shock, and finally with realization as the blond boy was driven out of every single store he went to. She watched as he skitishly approached the ramen stand ready to bolt. At a moment's notice, she saw the old man inside give the boy a hot bowl of ramen on the house, and then she understood. The memory ended there, but M remained in place. She had nothing to fear. This man was just like her, but he was offering her food. While she didn't trust the man yet, she would at least eat what he gave her. With the sheepish expression, she said, "Please give me some food, sir. I'm really hungry." Her point was made by her growling stomach. Naruto chuckled at her embarrassed blush. "Oh, come on then, M-chan, let's get you fed." And just like that, they were back outside the shop. She regained her senses to see the man beckoning her inside, and she absolutely blitzed into the shop. She sat on one of the stools, squirming in her seat, while she waited for the food to be done. The smell alone made her mouth water. She could only imagine what the taste was. When was the last time she had eaten a hot meal without looking over her shoulder for thieves? She couldn't remember. Emerald was broken out of her musing when Ramen Man set a bowl of steaming noodles in front of her. She was immediately about to pounce when, "Slow down there, M-chan. It's not going anywhere, you know. Eat slowly, savor the taste, and if you need more, just ask," Naruto said, putting her mind at ease. She nodded tentatively and put the first bite in her mouth. It was salty, sour, tangy, and all kinds of good things mixed together. It was hot and comforting to eat, but most importantly, it made for her, only for her, with love and care, the first home-cooked meal she had eaten. Unbeknownst to her, a single tear rolled down her eye, which was noticed by Naruto, who was standing away, smiling softly. Emerald ignored her tears as she realized, in the comfort this meal provided, she didn't think ramen would taste this good, but she was wrong because it was the best thing she had ever eaten in her life.